Caught, you thief! The words cut through the air like a whip, sharp enough to turn heads in the crowded supermarket aisle. Evelyn Washington froze her hand, still resting on the shelf where a box of tea waited to be chosen. At 68, she had survived a lifetime of battles, marches for civil rights, the long nights of raising children alone, the loneliness of widowhood. She had come here for bread, milk, soup, and a little peace. But peace shattered in an instant. Tyler Reed, a young white man loitering nearby, had slipped a chocolate bar into her open handbag moments earlier. A cruel prank born of boredom and arrogance became a weapon. Security guards surged toward her, their voices curt, their eyes full of judgment. Evelyn's protests were swallowed by the blare of alarms and the clinking of handcuffs. Officer Daniels' face set like stone, didn't ask questions, only took her arm and led her toward the exit as shoppers stared. In that humiliating moment, Evelyn saw the shadow of the past she thought she had left behind: systemic bias, false accusations, and the assumption that her voice didn't matter. She didn't know it yet, but this was the spark that would reignite the fighter within her. Evelyn Washington's life was quiet now, stripped down to the simple routines she could control. Every morning she rose early, the sun spilling across her small kitchen table where a single coffee cup waited. Her hands knotted from age, and years of factory work moved slowly but deliberately. Outside, her garden was her sanctuary. Rows of collard greens, tomatoes, and herbs neatly tended the soil, soft under her touch. She wore her hair short, the silver curls framing a face carved by time and resilience. A worn denim jacket was her armor, the kind she'd owned for decades. Strangers saw an elderly woman moving slowly through life. But Evelyn had once moved quickly, her youth spent on buses, to marches. Her arms locked with strangers in Selma, her voice raw from shouting for justice. The years had brought loss. Her husband's sudden passing left her with an empty house. Her children, grown and scattered, called when they could. She preferred to avoid the chaos of the world, finding comfort in small errands like her weekly trip to the supermarket. That day had started like any other, her mind on tea and a good book waiting at home. Yet deep down, she carried the memory of how the system had treated her before: false accusations during protests, police who refused to listen. So, when the young officer's hand closed around her arm in the store, dragging her toward the door, the shock was sharp, but not unfamiliar. She wanted to retreat, to let it pass. But another part of her, the part forged in fire decades ago, whispered that silence was surrender. By the time she reached the police station, Evelyn had made her decision. She would not let this go quietly. The fluorescent lights of the police station buzzed overhead, a harsh counterpoint to the pounding in Evelyn's ears. Officer Daniels led her to the booking desk without a single question, his grip firm but impersonal. She had the distinct sense that to him, she was already guilty. "I need to speak," she began, her voice steady, despite the tremor in her hands. "Someone put that chocolate bar in my bag." "I didn't." Daniels didn't look at her. "You can explain in court." The words stung. She had been here before, different building, different year, but the same wall of indifference. She glanced around the room. No one met her eyes. The young clerk typing at the desk kept his head down. Even the other officers in the corner spoke quietly among themselves, avoiding any acknowledgement of her presence. Minutes later, the heavy door swung open, and in walked Mr. Harlan, the supermarket manager. His starched white shirt was spotless, his tie perfectly knotted, and his smile cold. "That's her," he said, gesturing as though she were an object. "We caught her red-handed." "I didn't take anything," Evelyn replied firmly. Mr. Harlan gave a mock sigh. "Unfortunately, the camera in that aisle hasn't been working for weeks, but our staff saw her and we have store policy to follow." Her stomach turned. Broken cameras, convenient witnesses, it all felt too easy. Evelyn suspected that even if the truth was right in front of them, They wouldn't want to see it. They took her fingerprints, photographed her, and handed her a citation for shoplifting. Daniels leaned close, his voice low and almost taunting. "If you confess, we can wrap this up fast. Otherwise, you're looking at a trial. And trust me, ma'am, no jury's going to believe you over us." It was a trap. Confessing meant accepting the stain on her record. Fighting meant going to war with a system built to crush her. Evelyn's heart thudded, her pulse racing, but she refused to speak another word. As they led her to the holding area, she noticed the other women inside, eyes wary, bodies hunched. Some glanced at her with sympathy, others with resignation. She wondered how many of them had been caught in the same web of assumption and bias. By the time she was released that night pending a court date, the damage had already begun. A local news outlet had run the story, "Elderly Woman Accused of Shoplifting from Harlan's Market." The comments online were merciless strangers, calling her a scammer, a drain on society, a professional thief hiding behind her age. She returned home to find 2 voicemails from her niece. The first was cautious concern. The second, tense and clipped, warned her to let it go before things got worse. But Evelyn knew she wouldn't. She couldn't. She had lived through too many years of swallowing injustice to walk away now. The store's so-called broken camera gnawed at her if it truly didn't work. Why had it been pointed directly at the tea aisle, and why had Tyler Reed, the young man she'd noticed earlier, been hanging around without buying a thing? She didn't have the answers yet, but she had resolve. And resolve, she reminded herself, had carried her through darker nights than this. She sat down at her kitchen table, pen in hand, and began writing a detailed account of everything that had happened, every glance, every word, every moment. If no one else was going to fight for her, she would fight for herself. If you've ever felt the sting of being accused of something you didn't do, like share and subscribe, this is only the beginning of Evelyn's battle. The next morning, the air in Evelyn's small home felt heavier, as if the accusation itself had seeped into the walls. She sat at her kitchen table, staring into the steam curling from her coffee cup, the bitter scent mixing with the sharp ache in her chest. Sleep had been elusive. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard that voice again. "Caught you, thief." She turned on the television for company, but regretted it instantly. A local station replayed her mugshot alongside grainy footage of her being escorted from the supermarket. The anchor's tone was almost casual, but the damage was done. Her face was now tied to the word shoplifter in the public mind. She picked up the phone to call her niece Camille. The first ring was answered, but Camille's voice was cool, distant. "Auntie, maybe you should just move on. It's not worth the trouble." Before Evelyn could respond, the line went dead. The isolation deepened. Neighbors who once waved from across the street now turned away, pretending to be preoccupied with their lawns or their phones. At the corner store, the cashier avoided her eyes, bagging her purchases in silence. By the third day, the harassment began. The first call came late at night, just heavy breathing before the click of the receiver. The second, a low male voice. "Drop it, old lady, or you'll regret it." She hung up, but her hands trembled for hours afterward. Evelyn found herself pacing from room to room, checking the locks twice, 3 times before bed. Her garden, once her refuge, now felt exposed. She noticed an unfamiliar car parked near the curb one afternoon, its tinted windows hiding whoever sat inside. She stood at her window, watching, until it finally rolled away. But the quiet hurt the most. Silence from friends she'd known for decades, silence from her church group, silence from the very community she'd once marched for. It was as if her decades of service, her bruises from protests, her volunteer hours, her donations had been erased with one headline. Still beneath the humiliation and fear, something stirred. She began keeping a notebook on her dining table, writing down every threatening call, every suspicious glance, every detail she remembered from the supermarket that day. She replayed the scene over and over in her mind. The smirk on Tyler Reed's face, the way he hovered near her cart without picking anything up, the way the chocolate bar had been neatly placed on top of her wallet inside her bag. She also remembered Officer Daniels's expression, cold, almost eager, as if he'd already decided the ending before hearing the story. The more she wrote, the more her fear hardened into resolve. Evelyn had spent her youth fighting to be seen, to be heard, to be treated as equal, and though the years had slowed her steps, they had not dulled her will. Late one night, unable to sleep, she dug through a box in her closet and found an old photograph of herself in Selma arms linked with other marchers, her face fierce and unyielding despite the police presence in the background. She studied it for a long time, remembering the chants, the tear gas, the way her heart had pounded, but never faltered. The calls continued. The stares didn't stop, but Evelyn began to understand the goal was to wear her down until she gave up, and that was exactly why she wouldn't. Her fight was no longer just about a chocolate bar or a single false accusation. It was about every person who had ever been dismissed, humiliated, or silenced because of who they were. She knew the road ahead would be brutal courtrooms, hostile lawyers, possible retaliation, but she also knew that doing nothing would be worse. The system wanted her quiet. She was about to make herself loud. 4 days after the arrest, Evelyn's case took an unexpected shift, not in the courthouse, but in the quiet, unassuming space of her kitchen. She was sipping tea when the phone rang again. Bracing herself for another threat, she almost didn't answer. But this time, the voice on the other end was hesitant, shaky. "Mrs. Washington." "Yes. Who's calling?" My name's Tyler Reed. I was at Harlan's Market the day they said you stole." Evelyn's heart stilled. She gripped the receiver tighter. "Yes, I remember you." There was a pause, then a rush of words. "It was me. I put the chocolate in your bag. It was a stupid prank. I didn't think it would go this far." For a moment, Evelyn said nothing. Her mind spun. This was the break she needed, but it could vanish if she handled it wrong. "Tyler," she said slowly, "you need to tell the truth. To my lawyer, to the court. If you really mean what you're saying, this is your chance to make it right." He hesitated, mumbling something about being scared about how Officer Daniels had already treated him like a good kid and waved him off that day. But guilt was chewing at him. Eventually, he agreed to meet her attorney the next morning. When Evelyn relayed the call to her lawyer, Ms. Carter, the young woman's eyes lit with possibility. "This changes everything. If we can get him to testify, and if there's even partial security footage, we can dismantle their case." They acted fast. Ms. Carter arranged for Tyler's statement to be recorded not just on paper, but on video. He admitted to everything: how boredom had led him to follow Evelyn, how he'd slipped the candy into her bag when she wasn't looking, how he'd laughed about it with friends, before realizing the news was running her picture like she was a criminal. But the real twist came when Ms. Carter subpoenaed the supermarket's camera maintenance logs. What she found was damning. The camera in the tea aisle had been marked non-functional in paperwork, yet a maintenance report showed it had been serviced and fully operational 2 weeks earlier. Evelyn sat in Ms. Carter's office as the pieces fell into place. So she said quietly, the camera worked all along, and they lied about it. "Exactly," Ms. Carter confirmed. "Which means this isn't just about clearing your name, it's about exposing deliberate misconduct." That night, Evelyn felt a strange mix of fear and anticipation. The fight ahead would be ugly. People like Mr. Harlan didn't give up power quietly. But for the first time since the arrest, she felt the weight of isolation lift slightly. She wasn't entirely alone anymore. Still, she kept her plans close. She knew how quickly a witness could be intimidated into silence. Tyler was young, impulsive, and vulnerable to pressure. One wrong move and he could back out. So Evelyn decided on a smart resistance she wouldn't announce what she had. Instead, she and Ms. Carter would quietly build their case, stacking evidence like bricks in a wall that would be impossible to knock down. She also began reaching out to trusted contacts from her activist days, people who understood how to navigate public opinion and media without giving away too much too soon. If her story reached the right ears, the supermarket and police department wouldn't just be facing one elderly woman in court. They'd be facing a storm of public scrutiny. The thought made her smile for the first time in weeks. As she closed her notebook that night, Evelyn asked herself the question that now hung over everything. When the moment came when the truth was ready to be unleashed, how far would she be willing to go to make sure justice wasn't just served, but seen? The court date arrived on a gray Thursday morning. The courthouse steps were slick with rain, the air damp enough to cling to Evelyn's skin. She walked slowly but deliberately, Ms. Carter at her side, her denim jacket zipped to the collar. From the corner of her eye, she saw the flash of cameras. Local reporters had caught wind of the case after whispers began circulating online. Inside the courtroom buzzed with quiet conversation. Mr. Harlan sat at the prosecution's table, his suit immaculate, his posture smug. Officer Daniels leaned against the wall near the witness stand, arms crossed, his gaze fixed somewhere over Evelyn's head. When the judge entered the room, settled, the prosecution began presenting the store's account. An elderly woman caught shoplifting, a chocolate bar found in her bag, a broken camera unfortunately unable to provide footage. But Ms. Carter rose with calm precision. Your Honor, before we proceed, I have new evidence to submit. First, she played Tyler Reed's recorded testimony. His voice wavered but was clear. It was my doing. She never took anything. I put it in her bag as a joke. I didn't think it would. His words trailed off, but the impact was undeniable. The prosecutor objected, claiming Tyler's statement was coerced. Ms. Carter countered by calling Tyler to the stand. Under oath, with the weight of the courtroom pressing down, Tyler repeated his confession. His eyes flicked toward Evelyn, once almost apologetic. Then came the final blow. Ms. Carter presented the maintenance logs, the service report, and a USB drive. Your Honor, the camera in question was never broken. In fact, the footage from that day exists. We obtained it through an independent review. The screen lit up with crisp video from the tea aisle. There it was, Evelyn standing quietly, scanning boxes of tea. Tyler stepping into frame, glancing around, and slipping the candy into her bag before walking away. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the playback. When it ended, Ms. Carter's voice was steady. Not only was my client innocent, but the store and its management knowingly withheld evidence that would have exonerated her immediately. The judge's gavel came down sharply. Charges against Mrs. Washington are hereby dismissed. Furthermore, this court will refer the matter of withheld evidence and false statements to the district attorney for investigation. Gasps rippled through the room. Mr. Harlan's face drained of color. Officer Daniels's jaw tightened. The reporters scribbled furiously. Outside the courthouse, the drizzle had turned to a soft rain, but Evelyn felt lighter than she had in weeks. Reporters crowded around shouting questions, but she offered only one line. Justice isn't a gift, it's a fight. By evening, the story had exploded online. Hashtags demanding accountability trended locally. The supermarket's corporate office announced an immediate suspension of Mr. Harlan pending investigation. Officer Daniels faced internal review for his handling of the arrest. The next Sunday, Evelyn returned to her church. As she stepped inside, a few heads turned not with suspicion this time, but with something closer to respect. A young woman from the congregation approached and squeezed her hand. You stood your ground, she said softly. That means something. Evelyn smiled faintly. She knew the battle wasn't over. These moments rarely changed the system overnight. But for now, she had her dignity back, and that was no small victory. Victory came, but it was not the kind that left Evelyn feeling triumphant. The court's dismissal of charges and the exposure of the supermarket's deceit had restored her public reputation, at least on paper. The news coverage had shifted from elderly woman accused of theft to wrongly accused woman cleared in courtroom showdown. Yet whispers still floated in certain corners of the neighborhood. Some people had already decided who she was when they saw that first mugshot, and no ruling could change their minds. Her health had taken the hardest hit. Weeks of stress had left her with sharp pains in her chest, and her doctor warned her about overexertion. Nights were still restless. The sound of a phone ringing could send her heart racing, dragging her back to those threatening calls. Friends returned slowly, some with awkward apologies, others pretending they had never doubted her. Evelyn accepted them all politely, but something inside her had shifted. Trust once broken didn't mend so easily. Mr. Harlan was suspended and Officer Daniels was reassigned, pending investigation. But Evelyn knew the system rarely punished its own fully. Tyler Reed, for all his cooperation, received only community service. She didn't wish him ruin. He was young and foolish, but a small part of her wondered if his light punishment would teach him anything lasting. Evelyn had won the battle, yes. But in the quiet moments, sitting at her kitchen table pruning her garden, she understood the war was far larger than her single case. The same machinery that had turned on her could just as easily grind someone else down tomorrow. Justice, she realized, was never easy or complete. It came with scars on reputations, on relationships, on the body itself. And though she had emerged standing, she had not emerged unscathed. That night, she walked into her garden, feeling the damp soil beneath her shoes. The air was cool, the scent of mint and rosemary rising from the earth. She took a deep breath, letting the quiet wrap around her. The fight had cost her dearly, but she was still here, still standing. Evelyn's journey was more than a courtroom victory. It was a mirror held up to the quiet, dangerous ways injustice hides in plain sight. Her story showed how a single false accusation can unravel a person's dignity, health, and place in their community, and how the truth, no matter how clear, must often be fought for tooth and nail. For the audience, her experience is a reminder that justice is not a passive process. It doesn't simply appear when you are right. It must be demanded, defended, and pursued with persistence, even when the odds seem stacked against you. Evelyn's courage wasn't loud or flashy. It was the steady kind built from years of knowing what it feels like to be silenced and choosing again and again to speak anyway. Her fight also carries a warning. Bias doesn't always wear a badge or stand behind a counter. It can live in our assumptions in the stories we accept, without question. Each of us has the power to challenge those assumptions, to ask harder questions before we rush to judgment. In the end, Evelyn's story is not just about clearing her name. It's about inspiring others to defend their own truth and to stand beside those whose voices are ignored. It's about planting seeds of change even when you may never see them bloom. Because sometimes the greatest victory isn't in winning for yourself. It's in leaving the path clearer for the next person who has to fight. Evelyn's fight reminds us that truth and justice are worth standing up for, no matter the cost. Stories like hers deserve to be heard, shared, and remembered because they shine a light on struggles too many still face in silence. If Evelyn's journey moved, you don't let it end here. Click on the next video on your screen to discover more real stories of resilience and courage. Leave a comment below with your thoughts. Your voice matters in this conversation. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. It's free, and every click helps keep these stories alive.